we're going to use some of the tools that are built into Onshape to kind of help us out with determining our maximum scale factor. What that means is, when we go to make a drawing file in Onshape, it's going to kind of help us out to try to help figure out what the right scale factor is to use for our designs. We're going to set this up first as though we were getting things ready to laser cut, but we're going to use that same scale factor for both laser cutting and 3D printing. What I want to do right now is kind of take you through the steps of that, and I'm going to do that in Onshape itself. So let me flip back over to our Onshape window. So this is my tiny house design. This is actually the footprint of the engineering lab. So my model is actually bigger than what the constraints allow you to make. So my scale factor is going to necessarily be different. But here's the thing. Each of your scale factors may be different from one another. So some of you might use one, another of you might use a different one. What I'm going to show you is the process for how to figure that out and how to set that. So here's what that looks like. I'm going to go ahead and make a new drawing file in Onshape. And I want to make sure that I specifically choose a custom template. I'm going to say to not include borders of title block. This stuff doesn't matter over here right now because we're going to go in and change that in just a sec in the sheet that we're going to make. So I'll click OK. And once this opens up, instead of starting off by inserting parts right away like I would normally do for laser cutting, I'm actually going to close those views because the first thing I need to do is set up my sheet so that it's ready for laser cutting. So I'm going to click on the Sheets tab over here on the left. I'm going to double click on sheet 1, and this is where I need to set some specific things. So the first thing I'm going to set is that the format is custom, that the size is custom, and that the size I want to use is 24 by 18, which is the maximum size of the bed of our laser. Okay? So even though we know not every part is going to be laser cut, we know that like the main parts of your house, the floor and the walls, are going to be laser cut. So we're going to use this as like our starting point, not only to get those cut, but also to figure out our scale factor. So that all looks good. I'm not sure what my scale is going to be yet, so I can leave that blank for now and click the check. It's going to basically update my drawing file to show me that I've just got a big blank 24 by 18 drawing. Now I'm going to start inserting my first part. So I'm going to click Insert. I'm going to come over here, and I suggest strongly that the first part that you insert here is your floor. It's going to be the biggest thing. It's going to take up the most space on the bed of the laser, on the sheet of cardboard that you're cutting. So when I go to put my floor in there, it's going to automatically choose the front view. I know that for mine, I designed it from the top down. So my floor is from the top view. And it's going to try to choose a scale factor for me. So the scale factor that it guessed at was 1 to 80. Do you figure I could probably make my floor bigger compared to the sheet of cardboard that's on here right now, so to speak? I figure I probably can, right? So I'm going to come up here and try like 1 to 50 instead. That looks pretty good. I could probably go bigger than that still on mine. I could probably go like 1 to 40 and it would still fit, and that's fine. Keep in mind that my example is like 45 feet by 45 feet. So knowing that the maximum size of yours is smaller than that, more like 20 feet by 20 feet, or maybe you did 40 by 10 or whatever, your size, your scale factor is probably going to be different. For this demonstration, I'm going to use 1 to 50, but your scale factor may very well be different. We basically want to maximize how big our architectural model can be with the size that we can actually cut on the laser bed. Okay? So we want to get as much detail as big as we can without exceeding the space we got. So I'm going to place that real quick. And now I can continue on. Once I'm ready to start getting stuff ready to laser cut, I can continue on. But the important thing is that the scale stays the same. So when I go to insert stuff, let me go over here and click insert again. I'm going to go find another wall. And same kind of thing. This is showing it from the front view. That doesn't make any sense. That would be like the wrong view. So I'm going to go over to left. And I can just continue building up this file just like I would normally do for anything that we're going to laser cut. And by the time that we're done, what we're going to have is a file that looks something like this. We've got all of our parts that are going to be laser cut laid out in one drawing file. Okay, so this is very much like we did for flat to 3D. One thing I want to call to your attention, this is in the slides that are going to be in today's folder in Schoology. This scale factor and this setting here under Sheets is in the slides. So if you forget how to do that, what those should be, etc., you can look back there. 1 to 50 is an estimate. You might choose a different one, but that's a good starting point. So we're going to get all of our stuff ready for laser cutting. Now, one thing, this assumes that you're going to cut everything out of cardboard, but for some of you, you might want to use another material as well. So how many of you have windows, glass walls, anything that is a flat thing that's supposed to be clear? You got like a custom glass shower that's made up out of like glass walls and stuff. I know you guys did because we had that conversation. So I went out on Amazon and I bought us some sheets of clear acrylic. It doesn't look clear because it's got this protective paper over both sides. But if you've got an awesome like clear shower that's like 3 glass walls, or you really want to make your windows like you've got a cool arched window, and you would actually have that have like faux glass in there, the acrylic's going to be really nice for that. So all of the stuff that's on here would be the stuff that we would cut out of cardboard for your walls, floor, all that good stuff. But if you've got stuff that you really want to cut out of the acrylic, all you have to do for that is just make a separate drawing file that has just those parts that you need cut out of acrylic on that one drawing file. And then when you put it up in the laser cutter request form, make sure that I know we're cutting acrylic versus cutting cardboard. Okay? So let me pause right there and ask real quick, what questions do you have about the scale piece or about starting to get your stuff ready for laser cutting? Still another part I need to show you, but for right now, what questions do you have? All right, cool. Let me show the last part then, which is getting your stuff ready for 3D printing. So there's a couple of options in here, a couple of things to know about. In terms of getting your stuff ready for 3D printing, we're still going to go through the same process that we've done before, which is using the 3D printer request form. But there is a piece that you'll need to know, which is going to be your scale factor. So when you go ahead and upload that STL file to the printer request form, you need to make sure you include the scale factor that you used for laser cutting in here as well. Because here's the thing. In Onshape, you might have a part like this kitchen cabinet. Like this is like a cabinet with a bowl sitting on it, right? Because we used our real life dimensions, like however many meters, like 10 or 15 meters by 10 or 15 meters or whatever it is, if I tried to 3D print this at 1:1 scale, it would be bigger than the actual printer itself, right? It's enormous. I know though that my scale factor is 1:50 in this case. So what that means for this is that in the software for the 3D printer, I can just tell it, hey, you need to set the scaling from like massive, like 4 feet by 2 feet or whatever. You need to set it so that it actually prints it at the correct scale we're using. So all we have to do is just do a super simple little bit of math. My scale factor was 1:50. That works out to 0.02 as a decimal, or 2% as a percentage. So in the software for the printer, we just tell it to scale to that factor. We say, hey, this should be 2% of the file size, or the size of the file that we imported, and it will automatically scale it down exactly proportional for us. Okay? But in the 3D printer request form, you have to make sure that you put that factor in so we know what scale we're printing stuff. Because I don't want to print stuff that's way too big to fit in your house or way too small for your house. Got to make sure that we have that scale factor in there. Any questions about that part real quick? All right, one last thing that I want to show in Onshape, just to help you out. How many of you have things like a kitchen assembly that's like a cabinet and faucet and sink and all that stuff that's made up of multiple parts? How many people have stuff that's made up of multiple parts, like for a kitchen assembly or a bed or whatever it is, where one thing is going to be like 4 or 5 different parts? Okay, I had a feeling, and some of you may actually have it as well, and you just haven't thought about it. So here's the example. In Onshape, in my part studio, I've got this cabinet. This cabinet, as it is right now, is one part, and the bowl is the second part. So if I were to go to 3D print this, if I were to export this cabinet for 3D printing, it's just going to get the cabinet. It's not going to get the bowl on top. And that might be what you want. Maybe you want the tiny little bowl that sits on it to be its own separate part. But maybe you've got like 10 parts, and it's going to be a royal pain to have to 3D print all that stuff together. One thing that you can do is that you could put those things together into an assembly. So over here, I've got my cabinet and I've got my bowl. All I did was add a fasten mate so that those 2 parts are stuck together. I didn't even fix one. It's just floating in space. But now I could export that entire assembly for 3D printing. I could just come down here and hit export. I can hit export again. And as long as I make sure that I'm exporting it in the right format, STL, millimeters, etc., it's going to export that entire thing as one STL file to be printed, as opposed to multiple parts that you'd then have to like glue or somehow hold together. So for some of you, that might be really useful to be able to do that. Another thing that you could do is you could export the entire part studio as an STL file for printing. In my case, though, I don't want to do that. Why? Why would I not want to export this entire part studio as a single STL file? Look at my design. What do you think?
It's not done yet.
No, it's not that it's not done yet. Yeah, Zoe, what do you think? Yeah, it's going to export the walls, the floor, everything. All I want is the cabinet and the sink. So depending on how you've chosen to do this, you may need to pull it, like if you've built everything in one single part studio, you might be better off by making a little assembly like this. One other thing to know is you can put assemblies inside other assemblies. So if I'm like making a sub-assembly of just my kitchen stuff, where my cabinet, my sink, and my faucet, and all those things are assembled together, and then I need an overall bigger assembly, I can do that. I can create another assembly, and when I go to insert, I can insert an entire assembly here, like this one, directly in there. So here is both of those things already assembled together in another assembly. Okay? So we're getting to the point where thinking through this stuff now is probably going to save you some time and effort later on. So those are the things that I wanted to show you about getting your stuff ready for digital fabrication. What questions do you have at this point then? Either about laser cutting or 3D printing? Any questions then? Okay, awesome. I'm going to start the screen recording.